The stars had always been a comfort to humanity, tiny beacons in the endless dark, each one a promise of possibility. But tonight, they were still. No flicker, no shimmer. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath as the Dreadnought Sol Invictus crossed the threshold into hostile space. Its colossal frame drifted like a silent mountain through the void, engines humming with a low, steady pulse that felt more alive than any heartbeat. For the crew aboard, that hum was both comfort and warning. It meant they were still moving forward, deeper into the unknown. No one had ever seen this region of the galaxy before. Officially, it didn't even exist. The maps ended miles behind them, where the last signal from human space had gone dead. What lay beyond was the Dominion's territory, a vast, cold empire that had crushed every species that dared to resist. And now, for the first time, humanity was no longer running. The Sol Invictus had come to meet them. The ship's commander stood on the observation deck, eyes fixed on the distant lights that floated like embers across a black sea. Every crew member knew the mission was more than just survival. It was about proving something. Humanity had crawled from the dirt of a small blue planet, built cities that reached for the sky, and now sent steel giants into the stars. But in a galaxy ruled by fear, they had to show they could stand as equals, or perish trying. The silence on the bridge was heavy. The communications officer's console flickered with static, the faint trace of an encrypted signal breaking through the interference. It wasn't human. The frequency matched nothing in the known database. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, the message began to decode, fragmented symbols scrolling across the screen. Each one pulsed like a heartbeat, forming a pattern no one recognized. The technician looked up, pale, whispering, "They know we're here." Outside the viewport, the nearest star dimmed, its light fading until only a cold blue halo remained. The sensors went wild, energy readings spiked, gravity warped, and a ripple of distortion spread like a wave across space. It was as if the universe itself had frozen mid-breath. The navigation officer swore under his breath, gripping the console as alarms blared. "That's not a weapon," he muttered. "It's something else." The commander gave no orders. There was nothing to fire at, nothing to evade, only the stillness and the eerie sensation that something vast and ancient was watching them. Humanity had entered enemy space expecting battle cruisers and defense grids, but this was different. This was deliberate, like an unseen hand had reached out and pressed pause on the galaxy itself. Then, amid the static, a voice emerged, distorted, low, almost human. "You were not invited." Every screen aboard flickered at once. The crew stared as stars outside began to twist, warping into strange, spiraling shapes. The light stretched and bent, painting the void with impossible colors. And just before the systems failed completely, one final transmission cut through the noise, coordinates, glowing bright red, deep within Dominion space. The commander turned to his crew, his voice steady but quiet. "Set course." Because whatever waited in that darkness, humanity wasn't turning back. The Sol Invictus moved through the dark, its engines dimmed to a whisper. The coordinates from the strange transmission had been entered into the navigation core, and now the Dreadnought sailed toward them like a ghost through frozen space. The crew worked in tense silence, their movements careful and deliberate, as if afraid to disturb the stillness pressing against the hull. Outside, the stars remained distorted, beautiful and wrong at the same time, their light stretching in ways that made human eyes ache. No one spoke much anymore. The only sound was the hum of the ship and the occasional soft voice reporting system checks. Beneath that calm, every crew member felt it, the weight of being watched. It wasn't paranoia. Sensors had picked up faint traces of something moving alongside them, always beyond detection range, like a shadow just out of reach. Every time the scanners locked on, it vanished. The commander reviewed the incoming data again, eyes narrowing at the patterns. The signal that had given them the coordinates wasn't just a transmission. It carried fragments of something deeper, hidden inside the code. Layers of encrypted symbols, repeating like a heartbeat. It almost looked like language, but not one any human system could translate. The science officer suggested it might be artificial, an ancient construct left behind by the Dominion, or worse, something older. The Dominion. Even the word carried a chill. Humanity had fought them once in the border systems near Orion's Gate. The record said it wasn't a war, just a single encounter. A fleet of human ships had disappeared without a trace, their distress calls echoing across space for days before silence took them. Since then, no one had dared to cross into their space. Until now. The mission of the Sol Invictus had been simple on paper: reconnaissance, exploration, and recovery. But every soldier and engineer aboard knew the truth. It was a test. A statement that humanity was ready to claim its place among the stars, even in the face of impossible odds. The Dreadnought was humanity's pride, the strongest warship ever built, equipped with experimental drives and weapons that could bend the edge of reality itself. Yet here, in this strange, frozen region, all that power felt meaningless. In the lower decks, the engineers whispered about the light. They said it flickered in ways that made their shadows move, even when they stood still. Others swore they heard faint whispers through the communication relays, voices speaking words that weren't in any known tongue. The chief technician dismissed it as static interference, but even she looked uneasy. The deeper they went, the more the laws of physics seemed to blur. The commander stood alone in the observation chamber, watching the stars twist and fold. He remembered Earth, not the politics or the cities, but the sky. The way the stars once shimmered with life and promise. Out here, that sky felt like a memory. The further they traveled, the less human everything became. Then came the anomaly. The ship's proximity alarms lit up, signaling a massive structure ahead. It wasn't natural. It floated in the void like a broken monument, fragments of metal, glass, and something organic fused together in impossible symmetry. The structure pulsed faintly, its surface alive with streams of light that moved like veins. The coordinates from the message had led them straight to it. The crew stared in silence as the readings came through. It wasn't Dominion tech. It wasn't human either. It was something entirely different, ancient, deliberate, and waiting. "Should we scan it?" the communications officer asked quietly. The commander hesitated. Every instinct said no. But curiosity, that old human trait, refused to yield. "Do it," he said at last. The scanners activated, sending out a soft pulse across the void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, without warning, every system aboard the Sol Invictus flickered. The lights dimmed. The air felt heavy, as though the entire ship had been pulled underwater. And somewhere, deep within the structure ahead, a new signal awakened. It wasn't a reply. It was a summons. The sound that filled the Sol Invictus was not mechanical. It was alive. A deep, resonant hum rolled through the corridors, vibrating through the metal floor and into every bone aboard. The lights flickered again, dimming until the bridge was bathed in a faint blue glow from the structure outside. The pulse coming from it had synced perfectly with the ship's own power core, as if the two were now beating together. The commander leaned forward, eyes locked on the display as new symbols appeared across the navigation console. They weren't from the Dominion database. They weren't even from the message they had received earlier. These were new, forming and shifting in real time, almost like the structure was trying to communicate. But the language wasn't static. It changed every few seconds, reshaping itself, adapting, testing them. Down in engineering, the chief technician barked orders to her team. The reactor was fluctuating in response to the pulse, the energy reading spiking beyond anything the instruments could read. She tried to cut power to the long-range scanners, but the controls didn't respond. The ship was no longer listening to its crew. It was following something else, something calling from outside. The science officer was the first to suggest that the structure wasn't just an artifact. It might be a machine, a construct built for something beyond comprehension, something that could manipulate both matter and time. The thought hung heavy over the crew. Humanity had always prided itself on discovery, but this was different. It wasn't exploration anymore. It was intrusion. Meanwhile, in the crew quarters, whispers spread. Some said the structure was a Dominion trap. Others believed it was a warning left by those who came before. The newest members of the crew tried to hide their fear, but even the veterans had stopped pretending. They all felt it. The sense of being pulled toward something ancient and vast, something that didn't see them as enemies or explorers, but as tools. The commander ordered a small probe launched toward the structure, hoping to regain control of the situation. The probe drifted forward slowly, its cameras streaming live data to the bridge. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then the feed distorted. The image blurred into a haze of light, and for a single frame, a reflection appeared on the screen. A human face, eyes open, staring directly back at them from inside the structure. Then the feed went dead. The bridge went silent. Every crew member looked at one another, each hoping someone else would say it was a malfunction. But no one spoke. In the silence that followed, a low voice echoed through the communication channel. It wasn't loud, but it cut through every layer of static. "You built your strength from stars you did not own," it said slowly. "Now, you will see who shaped them first." The signal vanished, leaving only the hum of the structure and the growing instability of the ship's systems. The commander turned to the science officer, his voice calm but heavy. "We've woken something," he said. "Something that remembers us." Outside, the stars continued to twist, forming strange, looping patterns around the ship. And far beyond, deep in the shadows of the Dominion's territory, other lights began to stir, faint signatures of massive ships moving through the void. The Sol Invictus wasn't alone anymore. What no one knew yet was that the structure ahead wasn't a weapon or a trap. It was a key. And the moment humanity touched it, something vast began to unlock. The air inside the Sol Invictus felt heavier with each passing second. The hum from the structure outside had grown deeper, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the walls. It wasn't just sound, it was vibration, rhythm, a pulse that seemed to reach inside the minds of everyone aboard. The commander could see the strain on his crew's faces, eyes darting, hands trembling slightly over the controls. No one wanted to say it aloud, but the Dreadnought itself felt alive now, connected to something far beyond human design. The chief technician reported that the ship's core was no longer responding to manual commands. It was drawing energy from the structure, feeding on it. Every attempt to shut it down had failed. The engines had locked on a new trajectory, one that neither the navigation systems nor the crew had plotted. They were being pulled forward, closer to the glowing monument that loomed larger with every heartbeat. On the bridge, the science officer worked furiously to decode the remaining fragments of the alien symbols. Patterns began to emerge. Coordinates, timelines, sequences that repeated like a cycle. The deeper he looked, the more horrifying the realization became. The structure wasn't reacting to them. It was recognizing them. Each pulse from the core matched human brainwave frequencies. Whatever was out there knew they were human, and it was trying to reach them in ways no one understood. Crew members began to experience strange visions, short flashes, fragments of worlds that weren't Earth, cities of glass, skies filled with twin suns, and machines the size of moons. One officer swore she saw people in those visions, walking among towering pillars of light. They weren't human, but they looked aware, curious, almost welcoming. Yet every time someone described what they saw, the ship's lights dimmed, and the hum grew stronger, as if listening. The commander gave the order to ready weapons, even though no one truly believed they would help. Missiles and plasma cannons hummed online, the ship's defense systems primed for an enemy they couldn't even see. Outside, the structure began to shift, its shape unfolding like a blooming flower made of metal and light. Vast panels rotated, revealing enormous rings within. Rings that turned slowly, aligning toward the Dreadnought. The sensors screamed with warnings. Energy readings spiked beyond all known limits. Then came the signal. A transmission, loud and clear, flooding every screen and speaker. The same voice as before, calm but filled with something vast and ancient. "You stand at the threshold of creation," it said. "You seek to rule the stars, yet you do not understand what gave them light." The voice paused, as if weighing their worth. "You were not meant to return here." Alarms blared across the ship. The crew scrambled to respond as space around them began to distort. The stars stretched into thin lines, bending like molten metal. Gravity surged in impossible directions, pulling bodies toward the walls. The commander gripped the rail, shouting for emergency stabilizers, but the controls refused to respond. Outside, the rings of the structure had aligned perfectly. A sphere of light began to form at their center, blinding, shifting, alive. The Dreadnought system screamed as readings climbed into the unmeasurable. The hull groaned, metal flexing under unseen pressure. Through the chaos, the commander's gaze locked on the sphere outside. For a brief moment, he saw something inside it. A figure, tall and radiant, standing in the core of the light. It looked directly at him. Then all at once, the stars vanished. The galaxy froze again. Every system aboard went dark, leaving only the sound of breathing and the faint echo of the voice whispering through the static. "Now you will remember who came before you." The darkness held for what felt like forever. No lights, no movement, only the steady sound of breathing and the faint creak of the hull as the Sol Invictus drifted in silence. Then, slowly, one by one, the systems flickered back to life. The emergency lights glowed faintly red, painting the bridge in an eerie hue. The crew looked around, shaken but alive. Yet something was different. The stars outside were gone. Instead, the ship floated in a void filled with shifting light, as if space itself had been rewritten. The commander called for a status report, his voice calm but low. The science officer checked the readings and froze. "Sir, we're not in normal space anymore." The data made no sense. Distances collapsed into impossibility. The navigation array couldn't find a single known coordinate. They were nowhere and everywhere at once. The ship's clock had stopped counting time. Even the pulse of the engines no longer matched their internal rhythm. Then came the second shock. Deep within the ship's systems, an unfamiliar signal began to move through the network. It was subtle at first, a flicker across diagnostics, a line of alien code embedded in the ship's mainframe. The technician tried to isolate it, but the code shifted, adapting, rewriting itself faster than any human could track. "It's learning," she whispered. "It's rewriting our systems from the inside." The commander's gut tightened. Whatever had spoken to them, whatever had frozen the galaxy, it wasn't just outside the ship anymore. It was inside. The structure's pulse had carried something across the energy stream, something intelligent. The realization hit the crew all at once. The Sol Invictus had been infected. In the lower decks, strange phenomena began to appear. Gravity flickered, bending objects at impossible angles. Hallways stretched longer than they should have been. Doors led to places that shouldn't exist. One engineer swore he saw the same corridor fold back into itself, as if space on the ship had begun to loop. Fear spread quickly, but the commander kept the crew focused. "We stay calm," he ordered. "We find out what it wants." The science officer worked to translate the data from the alien code, hoping to make sense of it before it consumed the ship. Patterns emerged, images and sequences that resembled DNA but not human. They were seeing something's memory, fragments of an ancient intelligence preserved in light. Among the symbols, one sequence repeated again and again: origin point. The structure wasn't attacking them. It was searching for something tied to humanity itself. Then, without warning, the voice returned. This time it came from the ship's intercom, soft and clear. "You carry our echo," it said. "You left long ago and forgot, but your stars were born from ours." The crew froze. The commander's heart pounded as he realized what it meant. This wasn't just a powerful alien presence, they were connected to it. Humanity wasn't the first to rise among the stars. They were descendants of something older, something that had once shaped galaxies before vanishing into legend. But if that was true, then the Dominion, their greatest enemy, had known all along. The ship's scanners picked up faint movement at the edge of the strange light, massive signatures, dozens of them. The Dominion fleet had arrived. Somehow they had followed the Sol Invictus through the distortion. The commander looked out at the approaching shapes, each one glowing with the same blue hue as the ancient structure. It wasn't a chase anymore. It was a reunion, and a reckoning. Outside, the light around them began to swirl faster, pulsing like a heartbeat. The stars shuddered, reality trembled, and the voice spoke once more, almost mournfully. Now the children of two empires will decide who remembers the truth. The Dominion fleet emerged from the swirling light like shadows made solid. Their ships were vast and angular, surrounded by crackling energy that shimmered across their hulls. The crew of the Sol Invictus watched in silence as the enemy armada formed a wall of blue fire ahead. The commander knew what it meant. There was no escape. Yet, instead of attacking, the Dominion ships held position, their weapons quiet. It was as if they too were waiting for something. The ancient structure outside began to shift again. Its rings spun faster, light cascading across the void until the entire scene was bathed in a silver glow. The hum that had haunted the Sol Invictus since arrival grew louder, filling every part of the ship. Then suddenly, it split into two distinct tones, two heartbeats, pulsing in perfect rhythm. The ship's crew looked at one another, realization dawning. The structure wasn't just responding to humanity, it was responding to the Dominion too. The science officer's voice trembled as he explained. "Sir, the readings show identical resonance patterns between us and them. It's as if both species share the same signature." The commander stared at him, trying to process the impossible. Humanity and the Dominion, the fiercest of enemies, were connected by the same ancient origin. The voice that had spoken to them had called humanity its children. But it hadn't said only humanity. A sudden beam of light shot from the core of the structure, striking the space between the two fleets. The energy rippled like a shock wave, yet it didn't destroy. Instead, it revealed something hidden, a vast image projected across the void. Two figures appeared within the light, both tall and radiant, formed from energy and memory. They spoke without sound, their presence felt rather than heard. The voice returned, not through speakers this time, but inside every mind aboard both fleets. "You were one once, born from the same spark, divided by fear. Now you stand at the end of what we began." The Dominion fleet suddenly broke formation. Some of their ships powered weapons, others held position, torn between obedience and confusion. On the Sol Invictus, the crew watched as one Dominion vessel transmitted an open signal, images of their commanders arguing, voices filled with disbelief. They had heard the same truth. They knew. Then, without warning, the structure began to destabilize. The rings faltered, the light flickering wildly. The energy field holding both fleets in the frozen void started to collapse. The commander's console exploded with alerts. If they stayed, they'd be torn apart. But if they fled, they might lose the only proof of everything they'd seen. He hesitated for just a moment, torn between survival and history. Before he could decide, the voice spoke one last time. One must remember. One must remain. The meaning was clear. The structure could save only one fleet. The Dominion opened fire, not at humanity, but at the structure itself. The commander watched as beams of energy struck the core, shaking the void. The ancient creation began to shatter, releasing waves of pure light that consumed everything around it. "Brace for impact!" he shouted. The Sol Invictus turned sharply, engines burning white-hot. The light swallowed the Dominion ships first, dissolving them into the brightness. Then it reached the Dreadnought. The crew held on as reality itself seemed to tear open, time bending, stars twisting, and then silence. When the light faded, the Sol Invictus floated alone in normal space. The structure was gone. The Dominion fleet had vanished. The commander looked around, disbelief in his eyes. They had survived, but on the console, a single message blinked. One line of alien code repeating endlessly. The science officer translated it with a shaky breath. Division is the memory. Unity is the return. The commander stared out at the stars, realizing the final twist. The structure hadn't destroyed the Dominion. It had sent them somewhere else, somewhere ahead of humanity, into the next chapter of creation. The silence that followed felt endless. The Sol Invictus drifted quietly through the vast emptiness, surrounded once more by the familiar glow of distant stars. After everything, the distortion, the light, the encounter with the Dominion, normal space felt almost unreal. The crew sat in stunned quiet, each person trying to make sense of what had happened. No one spoke for a long time. The only sound was the steady hum of the engines, back under human control at last. The commander stood at the viewport, staring at the endless field of stars. They were back, but not where they started. Navigation showed no known coordinates, just uncharted systems stretching far beyond the borders of human space. Yet, there was no sign of the Dominion, no trace of the ancient structure. It was as if the entire event had been erased, leaving only their memories and one mysterious message still blinking on the console. Division is the memory. Unity is the return. The science officer had spent hours studying the remaining data, piecing together fragments of what the structure had revealed. Humanity and the Dominion weren't enemies born of different worlds. They were descendants of a single, forgotten civilization. Long ago, when the galaxy was young, that ancient race had scattered across the stars, splitting into countless forms of life. Over time, each branch forgot its origin, building new empires and histories, believing themselves alone. The structure they had found wasn't a weapon or a trap. It was a remembrance, built to remind their scattered children of what they once were. As the realization spread through the crew, a quiet awe filled the ship. The endless war, the fear of extinction, it all suddenly seemed smaller, almost meaningless. They had spent centuries fighting over fragments of territory, never realizing they were part of the same story. Humanity's greatest enemy had been, in some distant way, their own reflection. The commander ordered the ship's course toward the nearest star system. The engines roared to life, cutting a golden trail through the dark. Whatever the structure had done, it had also changed something inside their systems. The energy core now pulsed with a steady, clean rhythm, far more efficient than before. The technician said it was like the ship had evolved, as if it had learned from the encounter. As they moved forward, messages began to form from their long-range scanners. Faint signals, carrying human and Dominion signatures, mixed together in the static. Both fleets had been scattered across space, but they weren't destroyed. They were alive, somewhere out there, just beyond reach. The commander smiled faintly, a look of quiet determination in his eyes. "Then we'll find them," he said. If this was meant to bring us together, that's what we'll do. The stars ahead shimmered with promise. The war that had once defined humanity was over, not through victory, but through understanding. The Sol Invictus carried no trophies, no spoils, only knowledge. Knowledge that humanity was not alone, that the galaxy was not divided by birthright or conquest, but by memory. As the ship disappeared into the vast light of a new dawn, the final echo of the ancient voice drifted through the static one last time, calm and distant, almost like a whisper carried on starlight. Remember what you are, and the stars will remember you. And with that, humanity's Dreadnought sailed on. No longer a weapon of war, but the first vessel of a new beginning.